In the depths of an autumn night, a chill wind blows. A full moon arches into its highest point in the black sky. Beneath this, a monstrous howl permeates the darkness. From the studio of Blackwater Media in the great city of Atlanta, I'm Dr. William Lester. Welcome to Blackwater Media's Werewolf Files.
The story begins with a priest from a thriving village in Ireland who was traveling to a nearby town on business for his church. The priest's journey across the countryside was long and arduous, and as night grew near, he was forced to set up camp near a dark forest that was reputed to be haunted. During the night, the priest heard a clawing and scratching outside his tent. When he went outside to investigate, he was attacked by a wolf. He was bitten severely, and just as he thought the wolf was about to finish him off, the cross around his neck was exposed. The wolf suddenly ceased its attack and merely stood over him, staring into his eyes. Then, inexplicably, it ran off and left him lying on the ground, bleeding badly from his wounds. The next day he managed to crawl back to his village, where he was discovered by the local doctor. With good medical care, his wounds soon healed, and he was back to work in no time. The priest was re-energized and tackled his preaching duties with renewed vigor. He inspired the villagers and helped them to build a new church. The faith of his parishioners was strengthened, and every day his church was packed with worshipers. But there were still some problems in the village. Every full moon, someone in the village was found dead or went missing under mysterious circumstances. People said that they had seen a creature stalking through the village at night. A creature that walked like a man, but whose body was covered in fur and bore the head of a wolf. There was talk of a curse on the village, and many believed that a werewolf was stalking them and picking them off one by one. The priest began to wonder why God had cursed his village with these horrible murders. It seemed as if there was no end to the death and destruction. One night during a full moon, the villagers decided that they had to catch and kill the werewolf that was plaguing their village once and for all. They set a trap by tying the most beautiful girl in the village to a tree, using her as bait to lure the werewolf. High above in the branches of the tree, they rigged up a trap to catch the wolf. Then they hid in the bushes and lay in wait for their prey. Soon they heard a crashing sound coming through the forest, and suddenly the werewolf appeared in the clearing. As it made its way towards the terrified young girl, the villagers cut the ropes that were tied to the tree, and a huge cage crashed down on top of the wolf, trapping him behind its heavy iron bars. The jubilant villagers rushed out from their hiding places and drove long spears into the body of the werewolf, piercing its heart. As the monster collapsed on the floor of the cage, the people watched his hairy body ripple and change. Gradually, the creature changed from wolf to man as the life ebbed from his body. The villagers fell to their knees and began to weep as they realized that they had killed their beloved priest. There was once a beautiful girl engaged to a soldier who caught the eye of an evil woodsman who had sold his soul for the ability to turn himself into a wolf at will. He lay in wait for the girl when she was walking home one day and accosted her, begging her to elope with him. The maiden refused, spurning his love and crying out to her love to save her from his advances. The girl's cries were heard by her eager fiancé, who had come searching for her when she was late returning to her parents' home. The soldier drove the woodsman away, threatening him with dire consequences if he ever approached the maiden again. The furious woodsman lay low for a few days, waiting for his chance. It came on the girl's wedding day. She was dancing happily at her wedding reception with a group of her friends when the woodsman, in the form of a wolf, leapt upon her and dragged her away with him. The enraged bridegroom gave chase, but the wolf and his bride had disappeared into the thick forest and were not seen again. For many days, the distraught soldier and his friends, armed with silver bullets, scoured the woods searching for the maiden and her captor. Once the soldier thought he saw the wolf and shot at it. Upon reaching the location, he found a piece of a wolf's tail lying upon the ground. But of the wolf to which it belonged, there was no sign. After months of searching, his friends begged him to let the girl go and get on with living. But the soldier was half mad with grief and refused to give up. And that very day he found the cave where the werewolf lived. Within it lay the preserved body of his beloved wife. The girl had refused the werewolf's advances to the very end and had died for it. After his murderous fury had died away, the werewolf had tenderly laid the body of the girl he had loved and had killed into a wooden coffin where it would be safe from predators, and he came to visit her grave every day. Lying in wait for him, the soldier shot the werewolf several times as he entered the cavern, chasing him down until the maddened and dying werewolf leapt into the lake and disappeared from view. The soldier sat by the lake with his gun, staring at the rippling waters for hours as the catfish ate the bloody bits of the wolf that were floating on the surface of the water. When his friends found him, the soldier's mind was gone. He babbled insanely about a werewolf that had been eaten by a catfish when it leapt into the water, and he sobered only long enough to lead the men to the body of his beloved before he collapsed forevermore into insanity. He died a few days later and was buried beside his bride in a little glen where they had planned to build their house. Their grave is long forgotten, and the place where it stands is covered with daisies in the spring. But to this day, the people of the area have a prejudice against eating catfish, though no one remembers why.
Listen to me, please, and be guided by these words. Listen well and heed the warnings that I bear witness to, for this horror is real. How Satan first came to intermix man and wolf and unleash the plague of lycanthropy upon the earth is lost in the mists of time. What is sure is that in doing so, he created a vile affliction that has contaminated many souls and caused much woe in the world. Any who suffer the ruinous misfortune of being bitten by a werewolf, and who does not die of their wounds before the first following full moon, will fall victim themselves to the curse. When first bitten, to all outward appearances, those who have become infected by lycanthropy are as normal men. However, when the moon is full, the contagion running through their veins takes hold, and they lose all control of their mind and body. An irresistible compulsion drives the lycanthrope to abandon his dwelling, and in the dead of night find open ground. When the full moon light falls upon the creature, the transformation from man to beast takes hold. Once in lupine form, bloodlust overwhelms the lycanthrope, and it succumbs to the animal cravings for blood and violence that course through his being. The first few times that this change occurs, the slaughter of mere animals will suffice to sate his appetite. However, as time passes and the plague begins fully to infect his soul, such dull flesh as this will no longer satisfy his cravings, and the werewolf must seek out human victims. The more lunar cycles that pass before a lycanthrope is destroyed, the harder it becomes for them to maintain the semblance of human form. Eventually they succumb fully to the beast that lurks within,
and spend the rest of their days in wolf form, roaming the nights in an outrageous frenzy of bloodlust. Werewolves have the intelligence of man allied to the feral cunning and ferocity of a wolf. This makes them a dangerous foe to pursue. However, the flowers of the wolf's bane plant have a similar effect on them as the Holy Cross does upon vampires. To guard a dwelling against their entry, you should cover all entrances in an abundance of these pungent flowers. As you hunt their kind, a necklace of wolf's bane will afford you great protection. Know also that only weapons tipped with silver may harm a werewolf. Should you embark upon such a quest as this, remember my words, and may God go with you. I live alone, and have for 3 years since my divorce. And it's mostly been great to have my own space and my own house where I'm free to do whatever I want, whenever I want. That said, I spend most of my time in the evenings in my upstairs study reading, painting, writing, and listening to music. In the eyes of most people, I don't really have a social life, and that's okay with me. For the most part, I've never felt uneasy in my own house, until about a month ago when I went to the kitchen at night to make a drink. Now let me explain something to you. My kitchen overlooks an overgrown garden, which in turn overlooks some woods. It's a fairly rural area, and it's very quiet at night, which makes it a friendlier environment for some wildlife to come out. I often see foxes and deer, and I've been woken up at night by the scream of a fox at about 4 a.m. once. And they like to hang around outside the front of my house because there's easy access from there to my back garden and then to the woods. My kitchen has this big window which looks right into the garden. And at night when the lights are on, I can barely see more than a few feet ahead of the window as it acts sort of like a mirror. Well, on this particular night, the few feet ahead of me that I could see was all this thing needed to make itself visible to me. I hadn't noticed it until I looked up and out of the window after making my drink. It was a bipedal creature, skinny, but very tall with hind legs and covered with hair, except around the face. Now, it sounds ridiculous to some people, but the first thing that popped into my head when I saw it was werewolf. Its mouth or snout was protruded slightly, somewhat similar to a canine's, and it had ears that were pointed back at an angle from what I could see. And it just stayed there looking at me with 2 huge yellow eyes. Its head was tilted to the side and its bottom jaw was slightly open. I didn't even know how long it'd been there. I'd been in the kitchen for about a minute before I even bothered to look out of the window. I just froze. You think you can rationalize what you do in situations like that? But I was fucking frozen in terror. I was telling myself to move, but my body felt icy cold. I couldn't do anything. Eventually, like after 10 seconds, although it felt much longer, I managed to move and ran out of the room, not daring to take my eyes off the creature. And as I did so, its head rotated to follow me as I left to the comfort of the upstairs, which was the creepiest thing about it. Since then, I've not gone into my kitchen at night, save for a few necessary occasions. I'm preparing everything I need before it gets dark, and then staying upstairs for the rest of the night. If I absolutely need to go into the kitchen, I rush in so I can get out ASAP. That feeling you get when you turn all the lights off before you have to go back upstairs and feel like you're going to be chased upstairs by some unknown entity? That's the feeling I get when I go into my kitchen at night.
He has left his stamp on classic antiquity. He has trodden deep in the northern snows. He has ridden roughshod over the medievals and has howled amongst oriental sepulchres. He belonged to a bad breed, and we are quite content to be freed from him and his kindred, the vampire and the ghoul. Yet who knows? We may be a little too hasty in concluding that he is extinct. He still may prowl in Abyssinian forests, range still over Asiatic steppes, and be found howling dismally in some padded room of a Hanwell or Bedlam. Sabine Baring Gould, The Book of Werewolves, 1865. Flixton is a very small village about 5 miles south of Scarborough on the North Yorkshire coast in northern England. It's nestled on the southeastern edge of the Vale of Pickering, between the hills of the Yorkshire Wolds to the south and the edge of the North York Moors a few miles to the north. Today it's quite a bleak and desolate-looking landscape, elemental and rugged, with miles of swampy, open countryside. But long ago it was a dense forest with a large lake. It must have been quite a wild, remote spot in the 10th century, when the first known report of the Flixton werewolf tells of it terrorizing the local countryside. There is no way of knowing now just how far back the Flixton werewolf tales go, but in the year 940, the situation was such that a hostel was built in Flixton specifically for the protection of travelers. The werewolf had reportedly attacked sheep and local people as well as travelers. The winters at that time were recorded as being particularly cruel in northern Britain, and food was scarce. Freshly buried corpses were dug up and devoured, and anyone out after dark was risking being attacked. The Flixton werewolf became quite notorious around this time, not just around Flixton itself, but also in other local villages. However, the reports then stopped, and the werewolf doesn't seem to have been reported again for a couple of 100 years or so, when around the year 1150, the reports began again. It, even assuming it was the same creature, devoured a local shepherd and a young girl, as well as farm animals. This werewolf walked upright, carried a terrible odor, and had a particularly long tail and ferocious-looking eyes. Then all seems to have gone quiet again for about 600 years. Maybe we should pause here for a moment and consider the idea of lycanthropy, the ability to become a wolf or werewolf, as either as an inherited genetic trait or something which is learned and passed down through the generations, in particular families or groups, rather than a single creature wandering around for hundreds of years. Shape-shifting is an incredibly ancient phenomenon, reported from all parts of the world in all time periods, even hinted at as far back as the Paleolithic in Europe, where cave paintings show the possible transformation of humans into animals. Either way, it's difficult to imagine that a single creature could survive over a period of at least 1,000 years. One particularly interesting twist to the legend is that it is believed the werewolf was connected to a local magician who either used the creature for his own ends or was actually a shapeshifter himself, taking on the form of a wolf at will. Anyway, sometime around 1800, a carriage traveling to York was attacked just outside Flixton by a huge wolf-like creature who first attacked the driver and then the occupants of the carriage. One of the travelers reportedly shot the creature, but apparently he didn't use silver bullets because the creature was unharmed. It has to be remembered that wolves had been pretty well eradicated from that area by that time. And anyway, a solitary wolf would have been pretty desperate to attack a carriage full of people. Moving ahead to the 20th century, starting in the 1970s, a local report said that a truck was attacked when a huge wolf-like creature jumped on the front and tried to bash its way through the windshield. Moving further forward in time to 2016, a story that may be relevant was widely reported in the media about a creature which was seen several times near Beverley, which lies just over the Yorkshire Wolds about 25 miles to the south of Flixton. There were at least 7 sightings reported over a short period of time of a creature described as half man and half dog, which stood upright on its hind legs, then dropped down and ran on all fours before jumping 30 feet over the Barmston drainage canal. It was reported to be at least 8 feet tall and covered in shaggy hair. There is a local legend dating back centuries of a creature called Old Stinker, which is also tall, hairy, and had red eyes. Whether this is connected to the Flixton werewolf legend is anyone's guess, but local people organized a werewolf hunt to try to find more evidence, presumably carrying the customarily expected pitchforks and burning torches. So the Flixton werewolf may be a flesh and blood creature, or local folklore, but whatever it is, it certainly hasn't gone away. Another point of interest is that Flixton is the site of Starcar, a Neolithic lake village which dates back to the end of the last ice age, and so is the first known site to be occupied after the glaciers retreated about 11,000 years ago. This gives the locale a very ancient history indeed, and is a perfect place for stories and legends to grow. And although the oldest reports of the werewolf at Flixton date back over 1,000 years, who knows whether people were telling tales of strange creatures there many thousands of years before that, way back in the mists of time.
For the first 23 years of David Kessler's life, he was only human. Then one night he took a walk on the moors.
Beware the moonlets.
Is David behaving strangely?
Are you all right now?
Well, I'll let you know the next full moon.
Tomorrow night's the full moon. You're gonna change.
From the director of Animal House, A Different Kind of Animal, An American Werewolf in London. Rated R.
The areas in and around Columbus, Georgia have a rich history. And with this rich history, the city of Columbus is also home to a great number of ghost stories. The stories continue outside of the city limits in the surrounding communities. Those stories include one that is not a ghost story, but more of a legend that seems like something out of a late-night horror movie, and one of the most popular legends in the state of Georgia. And it has to do with a werewolf in neighboring Talbot County. Talbot County is a small community located to the east of Columbus. The county is home to a little more than 6,200 residents and a rather quiet place for the most part. One year, parts of the county were devastated when a powerful tornado tore through areas of the county, including the city of Talbotton. However, more than a century ago, a story came out of Talbot County that seems as though it was the inspiration for a nightmare. The Burt family was a very prominent and well-off family in Talbot County. The family had several children and lived in a home in the Pleasant Hill area located near Talbotton. The children included one daughter by the name of Emily Isabella Burt. Emily's father died at the age of 37, and her mother inherited the family's 300-acre estate. Shortly after the death of her father, Emily's mother sent her to boarding school in Paris. The legend says that while in Europe, Emily contracted lycanthropy, a supernatural transformation of a person into a wolf. Or to some, a mental disorder where a person has a delusion of being an animal, usually a wolf. After attending boarding school, Emily returned to Georgia. When she returned, her behavior was oddly different. People said that Emily was always sickly and distant. She often stared off into space and was known to sleepwalk. Shortly after her return to Talbot County, there was a rash of killing and slaughtering of wildlife, including sheep. Many of the residents believed that a wolf was to blame for those deaths. One night, local residents formed a posse and armed themselves to seek and hunt down the wolf responsible for the killings. According to the legend, an elderly man in the area who was a native of Eastern Europe told the members of the posse
to melt down anything silver. They weren't dealing with a regular wolf. They were dealing with a werewolf. The posse, armed with their silver bullets, descended into the countryside, seeking the beast. The story says that one of the members of the posse came across the wolf, and it was indeed a werewolf. The hunter shot the werewolf, wounding him, and the wolf fled into the woods and escaped the posse. Oddly, the legend says that the next day, Emily's mother found her suffering from a gunshot wound. A local doctor treated Emily's wound, and shortly after, her mother sent her back to Europe for treatment of lycanthropy by a specialist. The legend says once Emily was shipped off to Europe, the killings of livestock stopped in Talbot County. After an undisclosed amount of time in Europe, Emily is said to have returned to Georgia and was cured of the disorder she suffered from. She lived her life out and became a respected member of the community and inherited the family property, which included land in Talbot, Muskogee, and Meriwether counties. Emily died on June 18, 1911, and was buried at a cemetery in Woodland, Georgia. She was 69 years old when she died. So we're left with a mystery. Did a werewolf haunt the hills and woodland areas around Columbus, Georgia? We'll never know for sure. But what if it was true? What if? Converse, Texas is not the kind of place one would normally associate with a monster sighting. The town, while small, it encompasses only 6.3 square miles, is now densely populated and heavily developed. Sitting only 15 miles to the northeast of downtown San Antonio, it's become hard to discern where Converse ends and the Alamo City begins. It's known for many things these days: great Mexican food, the Judson High School Rockets football team, and Randolph Air Force Base, to name a few. Converse, however, was not always so developed and civilized. Like most of Bexar County, it was once not much more than arid plains, rocks, cactus, and chaparral scrubland. Such lonesome country often holds secrets. The area that was to become Converse is no exception. It's said that back in the mid to late 1800s, a rancher moved on to a plot of land near what is now Converse. The man was a rugged sort who had grown up in true pioneer fashion. Some versions of the tale suggest he was a military combat veteran who moved to the area in an effort to put the horrors of the Civil War behind him and live out his days quietly on the South Texas plains. This man had a son who was something of a disappointment to him. The boy was frail, bookish, and preferred studying to wrangling and hunting. This frustrated the old rancher to no end, and he decided to, quote, make a man out of the boy. To this end, the rancher decided to send his son out hunting. He hoped that the boy would take a liking to the sport, and after making his first kill, would prefer the more manly activity of hunting to that of reading and studying all day. The old man put a long gun in the boy's hands and instructed him to go out and shoot a deer. The family needed meat after all. He directed the boy to hunt a heavily wooded area along a creek called Skull Crossing. The boy was reluctant at first and resisted. One way or the other, he was finally coerced into going. The old rancher watched with high hopes as his son walked away from the homestead toward the woods. The old man would soon be disappointed, however, as his son returned a few hours later empty-handed. When chastised for returning without any game, the boy told his father that he left the area out of fear, as he had spotted and been stalked by a monster resembling a werewolf. The father immediately dismissed this wild story and cajoled his son into returning to the area to finish the hunt. The boy did not want to go, but his father left him no choice. Trembling and fearful, the boy trudged back out to the ominously named area of Skull Crossing. Little did the old rancher know it would be the last time he would see his son alive. Hours passed, and darkness began to fall. The old man, the story goes, began to worry and have second thoughts about sending his inexperienced son out into the woods alone. While he hoped the reason the boy had not returned was because he had yet to make a kill, he began to have a sinking feeling deep in his gut that something was wrong. Deciding not to wait any longer, the rancher rounded up some neighbors, and they made their way toward the wooded area near Skull Crossing in search of the boy. What they found upon arriving there is the stuff of nightmares. The search party happened upon a monstrous, hairy creature hunched over the body of the rancher's son. The beast was in the act of ravenously devouring the boy when discovered. The men got off a few shots at the monster, but it bounded away at lightning speed. The werewolf, as it was dubbed, was described as standing between 8 and 9 feet tall, covered in dark hair or fur. Members of the search party described it as being some kind of unholy combination between a wolf and a man. The old rancher was understandably devastated by the death of his boy. He blamed himself for not believing his son's story and believed he sent him out to his doom by forcing him to return to Skull Crossing to complete his hunt. The versions of the tale I've generally heard say that the rancher died shortly thereafter. Some versions say he had become reclusive, refused to eat, and wasted away. Others say that he committed suicide by setting fire to his own home and burning up. Either way, it was a sad end all the way around. Did this event actually occur? You won't find any old newspaper accounts documenting the incident. I've looked and came up empty. Somehow, though, the tale has lived on for more than a century. Should the story be dismissed as an old campfire story? A myth? I'm not so sure. There are similar stories involving werewolves and other hairy-covered monsters that live on in the folklore of the region. The story of the Wild Woman of the Navidad, Bear King of Marble Falls, the legend behind Woman Hollering Creek, the Hairy Man of Round Rock, and the mysterious limestone carving dubbed the Cleo Face, all allude to old tales of beasts of similar appearance. Of course, much folklore has a basis in truth. It's possible that the legend of the converse werewolf has its genesis in an actual event. Some believe that if a young boy was killed near Skull Crossing, it was likely the result of an attack by an animal, much more mundane than a werewolf. That's fair enough, but it fails to take into account the description given by the men who spied the beast. The animal was described as bipedal, covered in hair, 8 to 9 feet tall, and lightning fast. Whatever the animal was, it was not a mundane member of the local fauna. In fact, the description attributed to the animal, if given today, would immediately bring to mind images of what is now known as Dogman, or even the Sasquatch. Many Bigfoot enthusiasts seek to dismiss the idea that the converse werewolf might have been a wood ape. No doubt this is because of the alleged death of a human being at the hands of the said beast. Others are not so quick to dismiss the possibility that a Sasquatch is the villain behind the legend. Most who entertain the idea that the North American wood apes might exist speculate that their diet is likely similar to that of black bears. Black bears do subsist mainly on plant matter, berries, roots, and nuts, to name just a few. Black bears also indulge in eating insects, grubs, birds, and mammals when the opportunity presents itself. While rare, black bears do occasionally hunt humans for the express purpose of devouring them. If wood apes exist, and if their diet is indeed similar to that of black bears, then it would not be out of the realm of possibility that a hungry Sasquatch might take advantage of a situation where there was an easy meal to be had. Admittedly, this is contrary to the behavior most often reported by witnesses who claim to have seen Bigfoot. Most witnesses report that these creatures, once they realize they've been spotted, simply retreat back into the forest and make themselves scarce. It must be acknowledged, though, that tales of cannibalism and abductions have been associated with these creatures since time immemorial. Many Native Americans feared Sasquatches and believed they would snatch a wayward member of the tribe when given the opportunity. One simply cannot, in my view, use ancient Native American tales as supporting evidence that the Sasquatch is real, while ignoring the other details of the legend. People continue to disappear in the wild places of North America to this day, some under very odd circumstances. Many are never found. Most, no doubt, simply get lost and die of exposure, dehydration, etc. Others are likely the victims of foul play, of the very human variety. Could a small minority of the missing be victims of abduction at the hands of Sasquatch? The legendary accounts of Albert Osman, Mushalat Harry, along with the First Nations legends, suggests it's at least a possibility. The story of the converse werewolf is slowly fading away now. Sophisticated suburbanites have little time for such tales. As the years pass, fewer and fewer South Texans hear of the legend. Even those who have heard the story tend to dismiss it as folklore. It is a scary story to be told around a campfire or at Halloween, and nothing more. To those of us who pursue these creatures and venture into the deepest forests and remote places in North America, the story has a different meaning. It's a cautionary tale. Fact or fiction, it reminds us to take nothing for granted, to always be careful and aware of our surroundings. You might well suppose that we'll never really know what, if anything, happened at Skull Crossing all those years ago. And I'd be inclined to agree with you. Did a young boy really die? Did a grief-stricken and guilt-ridden father join his son in death soon thereafter? The truth, I'm afraid, has been buried along with the early residents of Bexar County. Maybe it's best it remains there. You're listening to the Blackwater Media Radio Network, the finest in digital audio entertainment. This is Blackwater Media coming to you from the great city of Atlanta. Do you believe that monsters are real? Do you understand that there's more to the world than what you might see on the History Channel or Animal Planet? Well, for me, the answer to all of the above is a resounding hell yes. And here's why. One night, just over a year ago, I was driving to the grocery store. But before I could get out of my neighborhood, I had to go around this roundabout. All of a sudden, I had to hit my brakes because a tall figure was crossing my path. It was walking right in front of my car and then stopped and looked straight at me. I got a pretty good look at it, and to say that I was instantly scared shitless would be an understatement. This thing was covered with what looked like brown hair. Its face had a little less hair, and it had what I would call a short snout and a mouthful of sharp yellow teeth. And the eyes, god damn, those eyes were pure, hot red. But yet, none of that shook me more than realizing that this creature was wearing a pair of ragged blue jeans. And I thought to myself, what the fuck? Then one word popped into my head. Werewolf. Then it started walking like a normal person. But then all of a sudden, it got down on 4 legs and took off running across the road. My eyes followed. About 20 yards away, it stopped right under a lone light pole, which afforded me another good look. It stood up again, looked in my direction, then turned and ran off into the darkness, this time on 2 legs. I whipped my car around the roundabout and drove back to my house. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 10:30. I jumped out of the car, made it to the front door, and ran all the way upstairs to my brother. I told him what happened, and it's crazy, but he believed me. Next day, we went out to where I'd seen it, but we found no traces. I never saw the creature after that night, but for the next 2 nights, there were blood-chilling howls off in the distance. I realized later that on the night of my encounter, and the subsequent 2 nights, that the moon was full. And that, my friends, is why I know that monsters exist.
The curse of the werewolf that was laid on a baby who grew into a man possessed by a monster. To this Spanish town, the night brought drinking and dancing, music and girls, and the moon. The full moon that turned an innocent man into a savage beast. The curse of the werewolf, a man possessed by a desperate need for love, who found in Christina all the passionate sincerity of youth.
Christina, do you love me? Will you marry me, Christina? You say you love me, will you marry me?
Yes. Yes, I will.
Help me! Get away! Get away! Get away! No!
Abizanda, Spain, September 29, 1992. We drove a few miles and parked at the crest of a bluff overlooking a series of mostly barren fields. There was little greenery save the occasional patch of scrub. The sun had already sunk beneath the rim of the world. My companion Sergio revealed from a case a 6.5 by 54 caliber Mannlicher Schnauer. Looking out across the landscape, he said to me, "Now we will wait." We waited there on the bluff for what seemed like hours, but I realized later that no more than 20 minutes had expired before the most horrific sound I had ever heard came rushing across the landscape. It was not exactly a howl, nor was it a scream. It was, upon reflection, a preternatural wail heralding the fulfillment of a curse. Sergio advised me to take my field glass and look to the left at about 75 yards. My field of vision was illuminated by an impossibly bright full moon. So was the view through the scope of Sergio's rifle. As the baneful wail began to echo down to nothing, I saw it. I saw it running at a tremendous speed. I could even make out the dust kicked up by clawed feet ripping across the ground. Although clearly inhuman, I could detect the vestiges of clothing, ripped, torn, and flailing in the air stirred by the motion of the thing. It took large, loping strides, and strangely, its arms barely moved, as if it were unnecessary for generating torque. It was at just that moment of my contemplation that Sergio fired a shot. The shot shook me to my core, yet I saw the bullet strike and take the thing to the ground. Then, to my horror, it rose again, in what were mere moments. I watched as it quickly resumed its surreal digitigrade loping across the dark landscape. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. That shot through the midsection would have killed any man ever born, and yet this monstrosity was knocked down by nothing more than the force of the bullet. Then Sergio fired again. The second shot struck the thing in the upper arm or shoulder, for I saw the ragged shirt flare upon impact and a patch of it blew off. The beast did not fall this time, but was pushed by the strike only momentarily before it continued its mad sprint. Sergio got off one more round before the thing finally dashed out of our field of vision. Again, that terrible wail exploded in the darkness all around us. I realized that we were now vulnerable to an attack from virtually any direction. Would the Wolfman seek escape, or, as I feared, seek to exact vengeance upon us? Certainly, if Sergio's rifle had failed to stop the beast, there was little hope of success in a hand-to-hand confrontation. In any other situation, we would have been more than a match for an assailant. I was 24 years old at the time. Although Sergio was 10 years my senior, we were both well over 6 feet tall and easily capable of giving a good account of ourselves. We agreed, however, with a glance and a nod, that indeed discretion was the better part of valor. As we headed back to the Jeep, I found myself muttering and musing aloud. What in God's name was that? And Sergio replied in a rare smattering of English. Nothing in God's name. That was the hombre lobo. We came to learn that the monstrous fiend that haunted the hills, woods, and quiet roads amongst the villages was a wolf man, a thing quite different from the so-called werewolf of legend. It was a man, cursed, possessed as it were by a bestial dark spirit that waged war with the soul of the man it sought to subdue and imprison. As such, the demon was brought to the fore when the forces of evil were at their strongest, especially in conjunction with the coming of the full moon. Unlike the natural wolf, the murderous abomination walked on 2 legs, at times even adorned the shredded remnants of the man's clothing. Strangely, until the time of the blood moon, the eyes retained a saddened human quality. We learned from the villagers that the burning of sulfur was prone to keeping away wolves. The scent permeated the air in the village square and the adjoining pathways. One night we ventured out against strenuous admonitions to investigate the strange happenings. This was the night that I was to experience the preternatural reality of the horror that has haunted me these many years. What I witnessed that night has never left me, and the nightmarish visage is a constant companion. It reminds me that at times, that the devil does indeed walk the earth. The following is an excerpt from the journal of Sergio Morales. Last night the thing appeared in the field below the village. The professor too witnessed the creature. I am sure now that he is convinced, as I have been for some time, that this was an unnatural thing. 3 times my rifle found its target, and yet the howling devil endures. I spoke today with Senor Abizanda and Sergeant Gomez. They have agreed to consult with the professor. Is it possible that together we can rid this village of its terrible curse? The body of night watchman Jose Mancilla was found inside his small two-room office building on the morning of October 1st. He had been beaten and pummeled with unimaginable force. His face and throat had been ripped and torn as if by the claws of a raving beast. Abisanda was a small hamlet, and the word of the horror spread like the plague. Item: the previously installed security camera revealed a brief moment of the deed, but little more. The tape itself was viewed by local officials before being secreted away. Item: the killer was possessed of incredible strength. The metal door, locked and bolted from the inside, had been forcefully pulled from the hinges and slung 30 feet. Item: the momentary flash of activity revealed by the tape indicated that the killer was, in fact, the same impossible monstrosity recently witnessed by Sergio and myself dashing across the fields below the town. This is as much as I dare reveal to you here. Suffice it to say that such horrors exist in this world. Though I wish it were not so, failure to disclose the reality of such things would for me be the highest form of hypocrisy. I've seen it. I've witnessed it, and it has been like a plague of nightmares upon me since those long ago days. So what do you think? There may perhaps be as many reactions to this experience as ears that hear it. I am therefore quite content to leave the burden of final judgment to you. If what you've heard horrifies or shocks you, and has forever changed your concept of reality, allow me to offer you one small glint of relief. Tell yourself, as I have day after day, night after night, that it's only a story. If you can do that much, you can convince yourself that behind the safety of your door, in the quiet of your bed, that it couldn't happen here.
Sometimes in a person's life, there's an experience that is so frightening and traumatic that their entire concept of reality is changed, and so too is their view of their place in the larger order of things. In the mid-60s, my uncle was a deputy sheriff in a small town. Now, I don't want to reveal the location because of all of the self-styled investigators, thrill seekers, and so-called adventurers out there just waiting to pounce. Anyway, he'd locked up a drifter who he'd caught in the process of trying to steal a car. The stranger had been ranting about having to get out of town before nightfall. He was sure that the guy was most likely stoned out of his mind. That night, my uncle was driving back to the station just off his rounds. He noted what a crystal clear night it was, with the stars and an almost orange full moon lighting up the sky. He was only a block from the station when something impossible ran out in front of him. Some kind of creature. It had to be, but he recognized the blue shirt of the drifter. It was torn in 3 places. But the thing, hair covered its face. Its ears were long and pointed, and it flashed a mouth with insanely jagged pointed teeth. It stood there in the middle of the road, snarling, not like an animal, but like a madman, and illuminated by the police car headlights. My uncle jumped out of the car and got off 2 shots at it before it dashed off into the darkness. He was sure that he'd hit it, but it seemed unfazed aside from being jerked by the impact. He found the office in shambles and the cell door bars were bent wide open. He didn't know it at the time, but my uncle had an encounter with a werewolf and lived to tell the tale.
A mother couldn't believe it.
Now, Rich, stop this monster nonsense.
A father couldn't believe it.
Stop it, son. Killing isn't funny.
A sheriff couldn't believe it.
Doctor, that was no monster I killed out there. That was a man.
But your son cannot equate with your killing a man, so the man becomes a monster, and you, St. George, slaying the dragon. Devils, witches, werewolves have been with us throughout the ages. Children do actually see monsters.
A figment of a boy's imagination, or true?
We have a big problem with Richie. He's on that werewolf kick again.
There's only 3 ways that you can kill a werewolf.
Oh?
By being stuck through the heart, or by being bashed through the head with something made of silver, or with wolfbane.
Here's the rest of him. Something must have come down out of the hills. Puma, bear, wolves maybe. When we found it this morning, one of the victim's head was missing.
God, that's awful.
Give us this demon and let us exorcise it.
It's true. Every word.
I'd like to invite you all on a most unusual journey. Mind you, we've been on this journey once before. You may in fact recall our previous excursion to first century Palestine. And although the destination is the same point in time and space, the experience, I assure you, is quite different. You see, what has come down to us as a story of betrayal is in fact a terrifying account of sacrifice and release from an ancient curse. Therefore, I offer you now 30 pieces of silver, which, by the way, is the exact price of admission to the Nightfall radio show. Darkness enveloped the city. Beneath the glow of a pale full moon, the streets were alive with activity. There was music, the incessant rambling of street merchants with their squabbling customers, the scent of roasted goat and freshly baked bread, and the powerful aroma of incense imported from all over the region. And of course, Roman soldiers scattered here and there. Not unusual at all for Passover in Jerusalem. Amongst all this, a lone figure maneuvered through the streets, trying to avoid dense gatherings and keeping mostly to the quieter, more dimly lit routes. The cloaked man had 3 destinations. The first was a door to be knocked on to receive the agreed-upon parcel, the payment being information. The second was another door at which the parcel would be delivered. The third was an isolated area outside the city walls, Gethsemane, and there he would wait. It had to end tonight. With all transactions concluded, he made his way out of the city to the prearranged location. A gentle wind danced through the darkness. He could hear the gentle rustling of the olive leaves. He knew that the others were most likely camped nearby, at least some of them anyway. Perhaps Lebbeus, Johann Andreas, even Matjahu. He wasn't sure. Yaakov and Shimon might be anywhere, complaining to whomever they could get to listen. As for the rest, he wasn't sure. He gazed up at the moon. Then he lowered his head, closed his eyes, and whispered to himself, "Forgive me, Yeshua." And at that moment a form appeared out of the shadows, a man bearing a drawn bow. "It's time, Judas. You held up your end of the bargain. The temple guards aren't far behind. The Nazarene will be taken before Caiaphas. Your money was well spent. 20 Tyrian shekels for me, and 10 Roman denarii melted down to make these arrows. Suddenly Judas felt a twinge of discomfort. Then the discomfort became pain, and the pain descended into agony, until at last, the beast, a man in wolf form, emerged. The man fired 2 arrows in quick succession, and the beast screamed in pain and fury, and then fell silent. Only a few minutes later, temple guardsmen found the body of Judas Iscariot with 2 silver arrowheads buried in his chest. They then moved to apprehend the Nazarene. Getting him back into the city without causing a disturbance would be difficult. But Abdel, the captain of the guard, agreed with the high priest. It was better for one man to die than for a whole nation to perish. I'd like to offer my sincerest greetings to all who care to venture into this dwelling of darkness. We will journey to the sea islands of Georgia, where the ancient mystic customs of West Africa have evolved and transformed into a uniquely American practice. Frankly, this is a story of brutality, vengeance, and magic. Our tale is called The Gullah Witch, and there is no better place for it than the Nightfall Radio Show. They called her Mama Lucy, and she lived in an old cabin outside of town, down by Fox Creek. Nobody really knew how old she was, and certainly no one had the nerve to ask. She could be seen each morning and again in the evening just before dark in a rocking chair, and the occasional passerby would wave at her, at which she would respond with little more than a nod. Rumors about the old lady had circulated for as long as a lot of folks could remember. She'd been born into slavery on the old Silas plantation, that much was sure. Her father had been killed by his owner, Henry Silas, and his brother James, when it was learned that he planned for his family to escape to the north, where he would enlist in the Union Army. She never forgot the horror or the grief. In any event, over the years, she showed a knack for concocting all kinds of teas, potions, powders, and even little amulets that many folk believed could fix anything from a head cold to a run of bad luck. But other folks were afraid of Mama Lucy. Some said she was a root worker. Others straight out called her a witch. And there was hardly ever a time when smoke could not be seen billowing from her chimney. One night in the winter, the coldest night of that year, so they say, a terrible scream was heard in the woods. Not an animal, but something not quite human either. Of course, no one ventured out to see what it was. After all, what horror might be waiting beyond the warmth and safety of your door? What evil might be dwelling in those dark, icy woods? Next morning, a grisly scene was discovered in those woods. There were bodies, or rather, body parts strewn about, most stuck to the ground in frozen puddles of blood. They were ripped, torn, slashed, and even partially eaten. All around the area were strange tracks that no one could readily identify. They might have been coyote or even wolf tracks, except that they were much, much too large. The bodies were later identified as members of the Silas family, specifically 2 nephews and 3 grandsons of Henry and James Silas. That same morning, Mama Lucy sat out on her front porch, rocking slowly in the cold, late January air. She looked down at her left hand
and saw the red, faded remnants of a pentagram. And for the first time in a long time, a smile of quiet satisfaction appeared on her face.